but also beyond elevating the soundstage when all of these highline speakers are being used for music, when the driver accepts a call or places a call, that highline speaker above the driver becomes the primary speaker for that phone call. So it allows for the remaining passengers not to have such loud audio of the phone call and allows the driver to hear that much more clearly.
How do they manage to not, the handle itself, not to compromise the sound waves?
I think that's just what the tuning, that the development of that handle and the driver, that they were able to work with the engineers to make sure that it was an integrated unit that didn't diminish it in any way.
That was a pretty good question from Ricardo, because I was thinking exactly the same as Ricardo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how did they keep it from being compromised? But I think, next, please. This lays out the drivers that are in the TLX. You can see the amplifier, the highline speakers, each of the drivers. But the main focus in the TLX, since it's quite similar to RDX, is that in the RDX, there is a large subwoofer in the cargo area, because in an SUV, that is very easy and natural to do. And in the cargo area, that large driver can do a very good job of creating bass. There's the packaging to support it. However, when you're in a sedan, you have to have the subwoofer oriented differently. And what has been the case for years is having a single large driver in the middle of the package shelf, just beneath the rear glass. And when you do that, that is the weakest area of that package shelf, because it's a large panel that's the full width of the car, maybe 12 to 18 inches deep. And in the middle is where it's most prone to having vibrations and so on. So it's suboptimal. So an engineer at Panasonic, a guy named Mark Ziemba, had this idea for years of having two subwoofers back there that were smaller drivers and moved out to the far left and far right. And I think he determined, as they continued to consider it for development, putting them at an angle. And doing that allows them to cancel out each other's vibrations, or at least minimize them. It also moves those drivers out to the edges of that package shelf where it is at its strongest, where it connects to the body. And it allows the bass in the TLX to go all the way down to 20 hertz, which is the lower threshold of human hearing. So it's got really good, clean, solid bass. And it's because of this design. And this design that Mark Ziemba came up with, the TLX is the first vehicle ever to have it. And I think the next slide gives an idea for how the inspiration for how the name and just the idea of kind of a slightly angled bass would be this, a brilliant civil engineer, Thomas Telford, came up with this bridge design. And when you look kind of on the slide above and below, you can get an idea for the inspiration for this. And then we already talked about the highline speakers. This gives just a little bit more. I got ahead of myself and I talked about the last bullet point on this slide, which is that the front highline speakers are utilized for hands-free phone calls. So I think next, another option, let's say, or just the way that the system can be configured is you can go into the settings and select whether you want the sound to be optimized for the driver only, the front only, or the rear only. And then obviously a fourth one that isn't noted is the whole vehicle, to have a fully immersive experience, which is how I always leave it set.
Chris, if I may, on that slide, when you have it as driver only,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that all the speakers in the system, let's say speakers in the, if I'm looking at this figure here, on the rear right will lower the volume quite a lot as to compose, and the volume will increase on the left front speaker automatically. Is that how it works?
I assume you are correct, but I would be going out on a limb beyond my knowledge to say for sure that's the case. What I think would be likely is it would do, I think, exactly what you described. It would favor the speakers that directly provide sound to the driver, and then it would diminish how dominant all the other speakers are. with the idea being that the driver can hear the system just fine, but the other passengers don't have it at such a volume.
That would be quite difficult, I think, to do. I mean, that would require quite a lot of trial just to make sure that the sound and the quality does not diminish just because you're listening more on one single side.
Right. I will check with Panasonic and learn whether it is something where some speakers are turned off completely, or is it a matter of them being lowered and the ones nearest the driver become more dominant? Like, how do they achieve that driver focused setting? And then we talked about the Highline speaker. You can see the dimensions of it, and holding it in your hand, it's really very small. It's almost like a wafer, but 3 centimeters by 10. I don't know if I mentioned this previously, but despite the small size of that driver, it's actually nearly full range. And by full range, I mean it's not only a tweeter, it does mids as well. And so that allows it to contribute in a very natural way to that elevated soundstage. And then we talked about this twin Telford subwoofer, but you can see here it's laid out in a way where it's more clear. This is looking at the TLX from overhead, and you can see the positioning of the long throw woofers that get the bass all the way down to 20 hertz, where they're at the outer edges of that rear package shelf. And now we can just talk a little bit about the MDX. It's the third vehicle to have the ELS Studio 3D system. Before I forget, I would mention that it is an award-winning system. Business Insider selected it in the RDX as the audio system of the year. And then in the TLX, Esquire magazine, this was just about a week or two ago, they actually selected the TLX's ELS Studio 3D system as their audio system of the year in a car.
I believe it.
Very good. More fans, the better. I love it. I love the system. This I'll also just gloss past because it's pretty word heavy, and it just gives a kind of the bullet points again of the number of channels, speakers, and wattage. And so I think next. Here you can see the drivers that are utilized in the MDX. Very similar in most cases, whether it be tweeters, the amplifiers, and so on. And I think next. And then here's the layout as you escalate from the regular MDX, and then you move up to the Tech. Just like in other models, there are 2 Highline speakers in the Tech that are above the driver and the passenger. And then when you move up to the top tier system, the Studio 3D, then you're up by 4 speakers to a total of 16. And you can see where they're laid out there. And you can see at the bottom in the cargo area is where the subwoofer is called out. And that in the MDX, just like the RDX, you can have a larger enclosure in the cargo area that allows it to produce bass. You don't have the challenge of a sedan, as we talked about how that was solved with the twin Telford.
Chris.
So the subwoofer is in the spare tire, or where is it on the MDX?
So the orientation, the way it's shown here, it looks like it would be at the spare tire, but it's actually, the image presents it incorrectly because it's actually to the, I believe it's to the right, and it's behind the wheel well against the body panel.
And this, of course, that doesn't present the technical challenges that made the 2 twin Telford subwoofers a must on the TLX, right?
Could you say that again?
Yeah, the cargo bay on an SUV does not present the challenge that made the twin Telfords necessary on the TLX sedan, right?
That's right. Yep, exactly.
Chris, just by looking at the locations of the speakers, and if I'm comparing the car to the MDX, you know, there's quite a difference on the location of the speakers themselves. Therefore, I'm thinking that the sound would be different inside.
And I should only speak to it from my own experience of listening in the car, rather than saying maybe how decisions were made, because I don't know. But I think in the tuning, with Elliott tuning each of these vehicles, they're able to create a really balanced sound, which I've listened a ton because just like Karina said, you know, any road trip, and I look forward to them, especially for the last year. I exclusively listen to music the whole time I'm on the road, and I am really particular about sound quality. I enjoy it a lot. And in the RDX, the TLX, and the MDX, I think the placement of the speakers, including the ones in the ceiling, the Highline speakers, when I first only saw those, but I had not heard the system, I was a little bit worried that you would be able to localize them. You'd be able to tell where they are. And once I heard the system, that faded quickly as a concern, because you can't pinpoint a sense of where the sound is coming from. It just is a natural sounding soundstage. So,
I guess, Chris, the question is, you know, which one is better or which one sounds better? I would like to assume that a sound system and an SUV, because it's more space and you have more space in the trunk to put the subwoofer, will sound better than the sedan. But I don't know. I'm asking.
okay. My own opinion, I really do think that the TLX sounds the best.
Sounds better? Okay.
I think they all sound very good, but having listened to them all, if I had to pick one out that I think sounds especially good, my own preference is the TLX.
I have only listened to the TLX, and it will be hard to beat. Yes.
You know what? And I think that Juan has a really good point. I think I agree with Juan with his concerns, because you know, if you were to be driving an SUV, the cargo placement, I think that would affect somehow the sound output. Whereas in the TLX, you know, the subwoofers and everything, especially, you know, they are positioned regardless of where your cargo might be placed on the trunk. So I think Juan, I do agree with Juan. You know, he has a very good.
I would like to think that one subwoofer is better than two, just from the sound point of view. But yeah, maybe the space in the acoustic of a sedan, it's just better. I don't know. I will have to listen to the MDX.
You know, yeah. and throw some stuff in the trunk as well.
Yes, some groceries or something.
Yep,
exactly.
I think that could be tough to work around. I bet with just a few groceries in there, I bet it would be fine. But on the other hand, if you were on a road trip and you really packed the trunk, then it would seem like that could have an effect. And I think where you were going with that, David, or at least I thought you were, is that in the TLX, that concern would be mitigated. You could have as much stuff as you want in the trunk, and there shouldn't be an impact on, you know, the base coming out of the rear package shelf.
The TLX.
Can you? I'm sorry. Can you talk a little bit about the decision on going with Panasonic versus other systems available?
Yes, and I will only say that, or I will caution that I will probably sound biased because I think it sounds so good. And in all of the loans we do of media cars, the RDX and the TLX and the MDX, because I'm so enthusiastic, I am constantly encouraging to, you know, please listen to the system, bring your favorite music, and try to have, if you have a subscription to whether it be Tidal or Amazon HD or one of the others that has high-res streaming, please use that. And I consistently either get feedback or I read it in stories that this is me kind of quoting other media who have said they really think that these systems, these ELS systems, are among the best in the industry, even when compared against some of the very high-end systems in the Germans, whether it be Bang & Olufsen, Name is another one, Mark Levinson in Lexus cars. There have been numerous comparisons noted, and I can honestly say, without me just saying this is my own bias, that the ELS systems are consistently held up as being right up there at the top tier.
And I can speak to that for sure.
Good. I'm glad to hear it.
I can say they're better than the Germans and the Mark Levinsons.
You know, the Bowers and Wilkins from Volvo, you know, that's a pretty sweet system. So I think I'm going to have to do a retest on the TLX, you know, because, you know, I think I have to crank up the 1812 Overture by Tchaikovsky. To me, that's a real the real good one to test audio systems, because it's got everything. It's got you know, canon blast, chorus, bells, everything. So that's a pretty amazing song. But you know, I have to be very honest. You know, I have to do a retest on the TLX, because I was mostly you know, impressed by the interior, how much the quality has improved on the interior build on the TLX. So I did not play that one song on the ELS, and I have to do it again. You know, so I'm going to let you know my findings.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I think we're near the one of the last slides. I think we did already talk about the Highline speakers, so I think next, please.
I think this one just shows where they're positioned in the MDX, but it's very similar to where they're positioned on the TLX.
Yep, to the RDX. The TLX does it slightly different, where they're in the roof above each rear passenger. But you're right, yep.
And then, yeah, that brings us to, this is our last slide.
I definitely gotta have this presentation. It's so good.
Well, I'm happy to, and Karina and I both, take questions now or follow up afterwards. I know we had quite a bit of back and forth just along the way, but do any questions remain?
Do you guys have any technology like Clarify, like with what Harman has, with filling in the digital gaps within compressed audio sources?
I would again be out on a limb explaining exactly what it does, but we do have a setting in our systems that is for improving the sound of compressed audio. So I think that's what you are talking about. And so in any of our cars with the true touchpad, which would be RDX, TLX, or MDX, you'd want to go to a source like FM radio or similar, where you have the option to select menu and then sound settings. And I'd encourage you to make sure that the bass and the treble are just centered out, and then move them up if you want. And then go further down, and at the bottom of the list, there are two to select from. One of them is compressed audio enhancement. And then there's something called DTS neural audio that simulates surround sound. And so by all means, have those settings where you would want them. When I learned a little bit more about the compression enhancement, that's something that I think a good default would be to always leave it on. Because what I learned when I checked with Panasonic is if you already have high resolution music, it will do nothing. And that's good. I'm snobby. I don't want intervention if it's not needed.
Yeah.
But when it's compressed audio, it will recognize it and it will enhance it to improve the fact that it's compressed.
Chris, quick question. All these, you know, we have 16 speakers and so forth. How much does it add in weight to the vehicle?
I don't know. And I don't know that we've ever specified that. I don't know that we've ever kind of just extracted the audio components to.
As you know, good speakers usually tend to be heavy. They're not on the light side.
I think you're right. Although I wonder if, I think keeping weight in check in all cars now is a high priority. And so I bet it's an area that our engineers have worked with Panasonic on to find a way to get the result needed while also not having weight get out of hand. Yeah, so I don't know if there are lighter, stronger magnets, maybe.
I think the more weight comes from the subwoofers, and I believe those are standard across the line. So adding the other smaller speakers would not impact.
Audio also needs, a good transmitting of waves. So good audio cables tend to be heavy too. So I'm just curious because that's with so many speakers in so many locations, I would imagine you have at least probably a mile of wire, just for that.
Oh gosh, I wonder.
I mean, one thing that I look for
on the table.
Well, one thing that I look for in weight savings in car audio systems is how much neodymium is being used in the magnetic drivers. And so with that particular material being about 10 times more energy dense than typical ferrous magnet-based drivers, that's one way that I know of to introduce lightweighting into a premium audio system. And Acura in 2000 was one of the first that exposed me to that technology in the TL with Bose. So I've been looking at that technology for more than 20 years now.
And I think it was called out in some of the slides that we'll share afterwards that some of the drivers do in fact use those magnets. Well, good deal. Well, Ricardo, I think my homework is to get back with you with regard to how does the system localize the sound around the driver versus
yeah, I think it's
so I can share that once I've gotten an answer.
any more questions, David, Armando, Gil?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
we're
much.
good. Thank you very much.
I was nerding out hard all the way through, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
One question.
And Karina,
This is
if you
Armand.
want to share that presentation, I can send it to everyone that did not attend, at the Zoom. So that way they, at least they can get the basic information. I'm sure they can follow up later on with Chris or with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for allowing us to learn more about Acura and your sound system, and the more knowledge we have is, the better for us when we objectively write our reviews. So
Very
muchas
good.
gracias.
Thank you. I appreciate your time, taking out a time in your afternoon.
Yeah,
No.
thanks, Chris and Karina.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
very
very
much.
much. Thank you,
All
Ricardo.
right. So
Bye-bye.
we'll see
Thank
you
you guys. Take
soon
care.
to all of you.
Bye.
All right. Talk to you
All
later.
right. Bye.
Good seeing all you guys.